Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Book and Pastor podcast. My name is Tyler Horton.
And I'm Scott Kohler. So, we have been planning to talk about, at the beginning of each episode, about what we're currently reading before we jump into other stuff that we have planned to talk about. And so, I'm going to start with what I'm currently reading. And I've been picking away at this along with some other things for a little while. It's called Remembering America, A Voice from the 60s by Richard Goodwin. Um, so this is not a new book. This is a book that was written in the 1980s. And I first became aware of it because there's a movie that I have loved since it came out called Quiz Show, which is about the rigged the rigged NBC and other network quiz shows in the 1950s, and the scandal that went along with that, as these geniuses on TV turned out to be not what they appeared to be. And that movie is based on a chapter from this book called Investigating the Quiz Shows. And so it's by this guy who was a lawyer who worked in those kind of things in his early career, but then became a political advisor for people. He was a close speechwriter and then an advisor for John F. Kennedy. Worked with Lyndon Johnson after Kennedy died, and then was close with Bobby Kennedy before he was assassinated. And so it kind of is looking back. It's a memoir, but also kind of his perspective on what made the 60s the 60s. And it's interesting, like he's a good writer. His wife, Doris Kearns Goodwin, has been a famous biographer for the last number of decades herself. He's died now. But what I'm finding I enjoy, aside from just it's an enjoyable voice, the stories that he was part of are quite amazing, is that there's this hopefulness around, he was kind of like what you imagine thinking back to the past of these hopeful 60s idealists, and he was one of those. And with things going on in the world the way they are, it sometimes feels nice to remember that there are times when people think things could change. But at the same time, because of the distance of time, the way that fears about the Cold War kind of hung over everything and clouded everything, and we know with hindsight how little of that actually materialized. I find that's also kind of helpful to know right now that
Okay.
as a lot of things go on, that you're kind of like, what's going on with the world? It's interesting to know that not all of our momentary reactions are exactly merited.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
yeah.
was wondering, again, like thinking about writing in the 60s and the 80s, how different it would be, because that's now 40 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, but this is also, like, this is a whole subset of reading that you do that I don't do. Um,
Right.
do you think, or where does I was going to say obsession, which is too much, your devoted interest in sort of America as like the cultural history of America comes from?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, definitely not obsession. I would say I dabbled in it. I think it probably comes from, to be honest, I think it comes from my interest in so many of the arts and culture of America. So
Yeah.
because I love 60s music and American music from the mid-century on, it makes me always curious about it. And, if you're a movie watcher, most of what you watch most of your life is American movies. And so it became a way of like filling in background, getting to know what the bigger story behind that personal story that I got in touch with through a show or something
Yeah.
might be. So that's
That
probably what it is most of all.
that makes sense. As I was thinking about it, I thought, I bet you he's going to say music because again, yeah,
Yeah.
you're so much into music. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
okay.
But the 80s thing is interesting though, because you could tell he's writing thinking that he's in the Reagan years and thinking that he's in the worst conservative takeover of all the ideals that he had. And then
Okay.
you think 40 years later, I wonder what he would say now if he were alive. Because he's writing sometimes as if it's again the end of the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What about you?
So mostly I've been reading Abdulrazak Gurnah. Um,
Hmm.
to continue with that, but I have started another book called. Be sure I get it right. It is called Missed Treasures of the Holy Spirit: Distinctive New Testament Pneumatologies. And so it's meant, pneumatology being, the study and understanding of of the Holy Spirit, especially in biblical texts.
Yeah.
What this is focused on. So from the title, you might be able to guess it's a collection of essays,
Yeah.
and it's trying to get the sort of unlooked at corners. There's some sort of major places where people think about the Holy Spirit in the New Testament, in particular, like Luke and Acts and Paul. And so this volume, I think, started as a conference, as many of these collected essay
Yeah.
volumes did. And they were setting out to go, what are the places that we haven't looked at that would help us to get a better picture of the Spirit in the New Testament? So I started it over a week ago, and all I've read is the introduction. And
Okay.
so I'm, yeah. And that's so that fits into my reading slot of on a work day in the afternoon. I try to do some like vocational related reading, typically academic stuff. And
Right.
so that part of my life has dissolved. Those free
Yeah.
hours have dissolved in the past 2 weeks. So it's
So
still
who
sitting on it.
are the contributors people who are quite well known, or are they sort of new up and coming scholars? And
So the one that I know is Jeremy Corley. So he's one of the editors. The other is Jesse Rogers, who I don't know anything about. The book will say something, but I'm not looking
yeah.
directly at the book. But Jeremy Corley's a pretty well established, yeah, more like biblical studies scholar
Yeah.
than theology directly. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
and the
But you've been
contributors I
reading.
think are best known to people who are doing biblical studies. You know, they're not the sort of big names. There's no like N.T. Wright or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
No offense to the contributors if any of them end up seeing this.
So you got to watch out for that. You never know how far your reach is going.
That's right.
Reaching into the hallowed halls of academia. Um, so Gurna,
Yeah.
you've been reading Gurna. I've been reading Gurna. We said last time we were going to talk about Gurna. So what are you reading right now of him? What's the journey been? Briefly before we talk about specifics, but
I don't remember how far I'd read when we last did this, but I've now read Memory of Departure, Pilgrim's Way, Paradise, and By the Sea. And then I've restarted Gravelheart, because
right.
that's the one for the book club the Acts 11 book club that we've talked about. So I'm rereading
Yeah.
that now.
Yeah.
Because you've
So
started as well.
I have, yeah. So last time you had read those first two, you hadn't started Paradise or By the Sea yet, because I was partway through Paradise when we talked
Okay.
last. And then I've read that and now am just a small ways in 60 pages into Admiring Silence. I wonder before, because what I think we want to do is talk about each book a little bit and about Gurna as a whole and how we're appreciating him. But I'm curious, can I ask you for a hot take? Do you have a favorite yet of the five that you've read?
It might
Everybody
be
loves favorites, and we should rank them, Tyler, on the
rank
spot.
them.
I'm kidding. You don't have to.
Yeah, great. But well, I mean, I would do tiers, and I would say Memory of Departure is a tier below the rest. So,
Right.
so far, I think it was his first. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it was his first published novel. It's good, but it's the only one I've given a 4-star rather than a 5-star rating on Goodreads. And
Okay.
I think I said on there too, it just felt slightly undercooked. Like it
Hmm.
was, um, yeah, like it was aiming for something but didn't quite get there, and it doesn't seem to have the richness of the other ones. So
Right.
that's an easy way to start the tier, or start the sort of what's my favorite, is to recognize Memory of Departure. I wouldn't send anyone to as a first stopping point.
Right.
Certainly, as like a someone wants to get to know Gurna well, then yes. Especially
Right.
to go like this is where he started compared to where he ends up.
Yeah.
That's I'd have a hard time separating the others. I have thoughts about them, but I don't know.
Okay.
Of the two that you've got, which do you have one over the other?
Um, no, I don't. And I think that gets to what we'll maybe talk about more, which is what it is we get out of Gurna. And I felt like I got two really different things out of. It's interesting. Well, maybe I'll start with talking about who he is a little bit, and you can throw in anything you've come to know. But just so that people who are watching that don't know anything about him, other than we've been saying his name for the last three times now, um, is that so Gurna won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2021, but he's born in the late 1940s in Zanzibar, which I have to be honest, we were playing a trivia game a couple of months ago, and an answer to a question that somebody pulled out of their head was Zanzibar, and it was correct. And I would not have, this shows you Canadian or Western ignorance. I would not have known where exactly Zanzibar was. Um, but he was born in this little island archipelago, Zanzibar. I think it's an archipelago, but there's one main island area, and it's just off of the mainland part of what is today Tanzania. And so when he was born, this would have been Tanganyika and Zanzibar, and it has had such an interesting history that I've tried to start to get to know a
So
little bit. And,
just for
yeah,
the
go
sake
ahead.
of people who will maybe notice, I think it is an archipelago, and I think there's
Yeah.
two main islands and then a number
Okay.
of smaller ones. So
Okay. Great.
one of us is
Um,
right.
Yeah, well, I'm betting it's you. I hadn't looked into that because just hadn't gotten that that questioning until the moment I had to say it. But it's interesting because like the main themes that people point out, the Nobel Committee pointed out, is this themes about colonialism, themes about displacement from home and being in the immigrant experience and so on. But to think that the years that he grew up were years when major changes were happening. They each separately, Tanganyika and Zanzibar, uh, attained independence from the British Empire, which had earlier ended up coming into them at the end of the First World War, taking them from German East Africa, which had conquered it before that. They gains independence, but then they become a state together in 1964, and then immediately there's a revolution, and and he would have been like 16 years old at the time of that revolution, which is when the country pushed toward socialism, and borders got really contained. And he, as I've heard him say, wanted to have a continuing education, saw that he was going to have to, in his current system, leave the country to do it. But it meant there weren't easy ways out at that time, and so made his way to the UK, but wasn't able to get back because of the systems in place. Couldn't go back for 18 years, I think he said. And so that kind of displacement from home and the experience of memories and of living through it all seems to have set the scene for a lot of his writing. But it still feels to me, and I don't like. I've only read two and a bit books, but man, the different aspects of that all, in some general way, tie to that experience of being from Zanzibar, Tanzania. Uh, there's a lot of windows and a lot of angles on what that experience plays out to be. So, what about you?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, I've got the quote. So, the Nobel Prize committee said they gave
Yes,
him the
read it.
award for his uncompromising and compassionate penetration of the effects of colonialism and the fates of the refugee in the gulf between cultures and continents. And it's
Mm,
like, yeah, no, for sure. And like, boy,
yeah,
does he ever do it. I think, like, you painted the picture of again the sort of the colonial thing, but there's also this whole element of a variety of cultures in the area, not just sort of like you know like Africans and British. That there's
hmm,
also because sort of with the British and before the British, Zanzibar and a lot of this area of East Africa was under Arab rule, and it
yeah,
was what's now Oman, I think, is where the sort of the Sultanate of Zanzibar was based.
right,
And then there's also this whole cross Indian Ocean thing with people from India, and
yeah,
so there's like, and I think as well, I think like his family is of Yemeni background, as in being from
okay,
Yemen, and so it's like this whole, or at least has some part of that in their background. So it's this
yeah,
whole like interaction of cultures and peoples going through, and I think that's where, um, I mean, I just think that's where the strength of his novels is
yeah,
in his ability to portray human life in the midst of all that,
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so complicated, but it
Hmm.
provides like rich culture, but also devastating conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that whole Indian Ocean thing. Like in one of the spots, I either have heard him talk or one of his. It might be in the narrator of Admiring Silence refers to somebody assuming that he's from one part of Africa and is connected to the Atlantic Ocean, and he says, "You didn't know that I was an Indian Ocean boy," and this the world of that Indian Ocean area. I heard Gurna say because there's so much trade going on in Zanzibar. He said that people could just be the way the winds blew every fall or into winter. The winds blew southwest, and so they would just put in at the shore of India and those places, and would land in Zanzibar. And then through the winter, they would trade, and then the winds would shift to northeast. They'd put their boats in the water and go back. But Zanzibar became this place where everyone's like meeting up through, and I feel like his books are alive with the feeling of the many people who are crossing paths with each other, especially Paradise of the two that I read
Yeah.
because it is in that place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it is, I think, one of the things people have noted in his writing is that it isn't like, everyone's good but the colonials.
Right.
That it's like, the Europeans, the Germans, and the British are the boogeyman baddies, and everyone else is just sort of, noble by nature and trying to do the right thing. Um,
Yeah.
and it's this portrayal of humanity that I mean, I actually don't know, because some of the novels are set in like modern UK,
Hmm.
and a lot of them are set like in East Africa at this period of time, or a mixture of both. And so
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, in the novels that are just based, that I've read, that are just East Africa based, I don't think he's got any. He doesn't pay a lot of attention to Europeans and Germans,
Hmm.
as in like they never form a part of the like main character, even second tier, maybe even third tier. Um,
Yeah.
and so again, but it's interesting that they're not just the boogeyman, and they're not the only ones who are getting it wrong about being human either. Um,
Yeah.
everybody is.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe can you take us through, like, in order, the ones you've read? Just briefly give us a sense of which one's about, because Paradise is the third or fourth. I think it's after. It might even be after Dottie. I got it mixed up last time. So, but you've read the first two, and then we both read Paradise. Can you start us with Memory of Departure and what's going on?
Yeah. So Memory of Departure takes place entirely in East Africa, and it is basically the story of a young guy who wants to emigrate but can't afford it. And so then, like, the central thing that happens is he gets sent off to an uncle in Kenya who's got money. And then he's going there to basically say, like, I need money. And, the family is saying, like, you owe the family money so that you can send me so that I can go and have a chance for a different life, and then be able to send money back and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's the central thing that happens. And again, I feel like most of his novels are distinguished by setting, as in, are they entirely in East Africa, or are they, or even not entirely, but mostly, or are they mostly set in modern Europe, especially the UK? And so this one is set um, entirely there, and it is, like I said, it is my least favorite so far.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it seems like it's a bit of a play on the classic story of escape.
Mm.
Like the kid who's trying to make it out. Um,
Right.
but I won't give away sort of the ending. But it
Sure.
feels like a bit of a play on that, as in questions about what should you be trying to leave, and how does
Yeah.
it work, and how are we tied to the places that we grow up, and the people in our families, and things like that. So I
Right.
think that's a rough idea of the first one.
Yeah. And then Pilgrim's Way. What about that?
Pilgrim's
And
Way
these are
is
written in, I think, 87 and like 90, I think, would be those first two books, or maybe 89 or something for Pilgrim's Way.
sounds right.
Yeah.
Paradise is set entirely, and there might be some
Or
flashbacks.
we're
Sorry,
doing Pilgrim's
Pilgrim's
Way
Way.
first. Yeah.
Pilgrim's Way is set, yeah, in the UK, And so this is a man who, and it never says Canterbury, but it's Canterbury.
Right.
And so he has been living in the UK for a while, came to be a student, didn't really work out, is now working in a hospital. And I really liked this. So this one to me, both Pilgrim's Way and Paradise do this thing where in like the last 5 pages, there's
Hmm.
like this huge, not almost like a twist or revelation or something, where suddenly you
Yeah.
go like, oh, like that's what this is.
Right.
And so Pilgrim's Way is like that. So it's distinct from the first one in that it's a different setting, but it's also a lot more, I guess, psychological, because the main
Hmm.
character, he's constantly writing letters in his head to people,
Okay.
and it's a way of showing a bit of his refusal to just be walked over, but his inability to actually do something and like confront people because he just writes them angry letters in his head.
Right.
Yeah, and so the
Um,
thing. Go ahead.
is is that a device like Gravel Heart is made up a lot of letters written to his mother, many of which are not sent. Are these the only two books that device shows up of sort of a sort of letter-based
Of the
narration,
ones that
or
I've read,
the
yeah,
ones you've read?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
these ones again are different because, um,
It's
well,
all a
no, in
processing
Gravelheart
thing,
he
right?
doesn't send a lot of them, right? He's
That's
right,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in Gravelheart he's writing them like in a
Yes.
notebook and never
Just
sending. This one he never writes anything down. He's
okay. It's
just
just all in his head.
and actually Pilgrim's Way is where it's funny. Where
Okay,
like
that's
I
something I wanted to say is like I feel like we don't want to miss out. When I've heard him talk about, he's very generous about not being dismissive of the Nobel committees narrowing his work down to that thing is what they're thinking about.
hmm,
But he also wants to say like that's not the only thing I'm doing, and I want us not to miss the other things. And one of them is that I get a sense of comedy, even when I can't see that
hmm,
it's full of funny scenes. There is this sort of liveliness to the world that is kind of funny in each book that I've looked at so far. So you were going to say though about comedy in Pilgrim's Way.
oh yeah, yeah, like the letters, just that like that thing in and of
Okay.
itself. And then there's a
Yeah.
few other scenes which aren't coming to mind exactly, but this one, Pilgrim's Way, is much more about like colonialism in this, and because he's in the UK, and it's like, what are people's attitudes toward him now that he's here? And then
Yeah.
it's this interplay. It's fantastic. It might be, when you asked me for my favorite one, it's probably what I would have said.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good to
it's
know.
yeah, so good. So Paradise. Why don't you
Yes.
start on Paradise?
Yeah. So Paradise is another one that is set in East Africa entirely. And it is interesting because so my first one was Gravel Heart, which takes place after the Zanzibar Revolution, 60s, mostly 70s to current times. But Paradise starts, I didn't realize when I was reading it, but we're back in the 1800s when it starts. And it covers quite a lot of time as this one boy is sold by his father to pay a debt and goes to a different part of the country and goes to somebody that he believes is his uncle, but finds out, of course, that that's not what the relationship is, and he ends up being owned by, working with, mentored by. Like it's an interesting, again, not it's a complex relationship. It's not just that this is a bad guy who has taken him, because he has his own sets of debts and things that he's done to deal with them. And so we get to kind of through these the man is a trader and goes on these expeditions, and the narrator Yusuf, or sorry, Yusuf, this is not a first person, it's third person narration. Yusuf and goes on some parts of these trips, but not all of them. And it's really fascinating, that crowd of people that do the travels and the different dynamics among those groups of men. But it takes us through to the eve of, as Gurnah refers to it, what we call World War One, the war of 1914 to 1918 is how he refers to it in terms of Africa. And this is that twist that you're talking about. And I feel like spoiler is okay here.
Yeah, I don't think we have
But
to.
I've heard him say that his idea, he said the first picture in his mind about paradise was the picture of a an African young man walking up to volunteer to join the German military at the beginning of that conflict. And he said, I wanted to say what would happen to lead that character to do that. And it comes surprisingly at the end, but it also feels like it makes sense that he's gotten to that point because of the things Gurnah's interested in doing that are not sort of just message or politically based, which is that we've walked through this kid's longings, desires, and heartbreaks, especially over in, romantic situations and so on. And we've watched him grow up, and he feels like this is the only path open to him. So I guess I wanted to say as well that I'm noticing in the three that I've read in that the idea of a coming of age novel fits all three of them. And I think that's fascinating to watch people keep growing up in different worlds. But yeah, so that's Paradise, I guess, for
So I would
me.
say Pilgrim's Way and By the Sea are not coming of age. By the Sea, the
Right.
protagonist is a senior citizen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paradise, I so again like giving away the ending, right? Like you get
Yeah.
all of this build up. To me, like the tensions in the novel are one of the main ones is this like tension between freedom and slavery. Like
Yeah.
do you
Yes.
get to be free? Are you owned by somebody? Who decides what? And then it's as the novel is sort of closing, there's some again strange scenes I didn't know what to make because again this main character Yusuf looks like one of the wives of so-called Uncle Aziz believes him is sort of smitten with him, but also thinks he might have like healing powers of some
Right.
kind in praying. And I was like, I still don't get what that is exactly. But then this
Yeah.
moment at the end where he realizes that he's essentially free to leave,
Yeah.
but he's gonna choose to stay because everyone around him who's been like there's other characters who are free to go but have chosen to stay. And so then his choice to go and join the German military is this like really ironic thing because it is his freedom from Aziz's house to go
Yeah.
and like join the slavery as an
Yeah.
African soldier in the German army. And the whole scene is
Yeah.
set up where that like the German soldiers, it's one German, like it's one European who just bosses Africans around. And then the
Yeah.
Africans run around collecting other Africans. And it's like, hold on, he's not going to freedom. He's going to
Yeah.
and so it's like, did you read that as basically despair? Or is it like a sort of emancipation of a different kind? Or how did you read that?
Yeah. So this is again where that's what we talked about last time of going back and looking at the first chapter again in relation to the closing was helpful to me, because at the very beginning when we see Yusuf while he's still free in his parents' home, one of the things that characterizes their life is hunger. He tells his mother how hungry he is. She teases him, telling him to eat pieces of furniture or something like that, and
Worms.
so on. And so, yeah, we have him as hungry at the beginning, and then in the last scene, there's this moment right before he runs off with the Germans where there is human excrement on the ground, and wild dogs come and not only go for it, but he says that they guarded it thinking that he is trying to eat, he is their competition for eating it. He says they knew an excrement eater when they saw one.
Indeed.
And I think that callback of like in his mind of being here, I'm on the edge of where I started. And so I think there's something about that and him saying I don't want um, that life, and it makes him not even think about the life that he's going toward. Maybe so to me
Yeah.
that hunger aspect came back as a significant part of his realization of the depth that he was potentially going to be in.
Yeah,
That
because
he's
there's like he ends up with again so-called Uncle Aziz because his
Mhm.
dad sells him. And
Yeah.
so I wonder just about the issue of the difference in agency. So he got sent there without his choice, and in the end, it's like it's his choice to go.
Yeah.
But
To go.
again, it's his choice is leading him into, well, not just like a foreign army, into the war of 1914 to 18, which is so ominous for us reading
Yeah.
it at this point. And
Yeah.
like I've done a little bit of reading on people who read Gurna, and
Okay.
again, unsurprisingly, the end of Paradise is a huge issue that people aren't entirely sure, and they argue about: is it totally despair? Is it,
Yeah.
ironic emancipation, or exactly what is it? And I don't think that I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, that's good. I know we're pretty much the end of our time. Can you quickly, we've talked some about Gravelheart already, but what about By the Sea? And then we can wrap it up.
By the Sea is again the story of well, it's two people, but one of them is an older man who comes to the UK as an asylum seeker.
Okay.
And then the other main character is a younger man who is also left, and he's made a sort of longer travel through Europe, and ended up in the UK. And the key thing about their two stories is that they have basically a family feud going, like a rather serious one. And there is a
Yeah.
character that's called Hussein, which is similar to Aziz in the sense that I feel like the beginning of that novel were meant to see Aziz as like exemplary in a way, like,
Hmm.
like sort of a real man and someone you'd want to be
Yeah.
like. And then it starts to slowly turn, or maybe suddenly turns, and it's like, oh, this is sinister. And
Yeah.
it's the same kind
And
of
it
thing.
becomes pathetic later on as well. For a
Yeah,
while, Aziz becomes a very pathetic character.
yeah. And so this one is similar. Is there's a side character like that who ends up being at the center of causing this huge rift and conflict between the families. And so it's yeah, I mean, most of it is you're getting this older gentleman's idea of what it's like to come as an asylum seeker at his
Hmm.
age, and what people's responses are to it. And then it's this
Okay.
whole, again, classic Gurna, this massively interwoven story
Hmm.
about the sort of interplay, and the people you think did wrong maybe didn't do as much wrong as you think at first, and
Right.
it plays like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're just about done your Gurna journey for now, I think. You're thinking? Couple
I,
more?
yeah, I'm gonna finish Gravelheart, and then I've got do you say Dottie?
Yeah, Dottie.
Dottie,
Yeah.
and then The Last Gift are the only two I have out of the library. So I'll read
Yeah.
those two and then wrap it up for now.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Yeah, I just got Pilgrim's Way from the library as well, so it's on my shelf, and I think By the Sea is at home too, waiting to be read. So I may try to catch up on at least a couple more. Whether I read something else in between, I might, but I'm interested to get a good taste, get
Yeah.
half of his books done at least for now. So.
I did want to say, so last time I was talking about his sort of narrative style,
Hmm.
and I thought, is it going to get boring? And
Yeah,
it absolutely hasn't for me.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think partly it's just because the layers are so rich.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
and yeah,
So I think I've been thinking like you talked about he's recommendable, but I've been talking about what I've been appreciating from him. But I do think that after this, certainly there's one or two that could easily be recommended to people and say like try this out. You won't be
yeah,
disappointed. You know.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. We don't have plans yet for what next time will be, but we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks all.